A little girl staggered to her knees, clutching her teddy bear as icy water poured down on her. Her aunt's hand gripped the hose. Her uncle's mocking laughter rang out while neighbours only whispered behind the fence. The child cried, begged, reaching for someone to hold on to, but no one moved. Suddenly, headlights flashed at the gate. A luxury car roared and everything fell silent. Who was the man stepping out? Why did his mere presence end the cruelty at once? And how would this single moment change the little girl's life forever? If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you silently, arranging everything then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The afternoon sky over Maplewood was heavy with a dull grey light. On the front steps of the Miller house, little Emily Parker, only 7 years old, collapsed to her knees. Her small hands clutched her head as icy water poured down from the garden hose her aunt held mercilessly. Her thin dress clung to her frail body, and her old teddy bear lay face down on the wet concrete, soaked and forgotten. "Get out of my house this instant," Karen Miller shrieked, her voice sharp as broken glass. Her face was painted as though she were leaving for a party, not returning from her brother's funeral. "You bring nothing but bad luck. From the moment you were born, this family has known no peace." Behind her stood David Miller, arms folded, a mocking smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The kid's been spoiled her whole life. Now her parents are gone, she thinks everyone should pity her. Another mouth to feed will only drag us down. Emily's lips trembled. She pressed her palms together, her voice breaking between sobs. "Aunt Karen, Uncle David, please don't make me leave. I'll be good. I'll do the chores. I won't bother anyone. Please, I have nowhere else to go." Karen bent down, her eyes burning with cruelty. "If it weren't for you, your father wouldn't have run into that fire. If it weren't for you, your mother would still be alive. You carry nothing but misfortune. This house has no place for you." The words cut deeper than any lash of the hose. Emily clung to her teddy bear, her small body shivering violently. From across the street, a few neighbours gathered behind the fence. They whispered, shaking their heads. "Poor child. But what can we do? It's their family business." No one dared to step forward. Karen twisted the valve tighter, the stream of water striking Emily's hair and shoulders until she could barely breathe. Her thin frame crumpled further, her knees scraping against the wet pavement. Her sobs echoed through the yard, mingling with the hiss of the water. Just then a deep, commanding sound shattered the cruel scene, the roar of an engine at the front gate. Heads turned as a sleek black car rolled to a stop, its polished surface gleaming under the fading sun. The neighbours fell silent. Even Karen lowered the hose, her painted smile faltering. The car door opened and Dr. Michael Harris stepped out. At 45, he was known throughout Pennsylvania as a brilliant heart surgeon and a man of considerable wealth. His name carried weight in every hospital corridor. But in Maplewood, people spoke of him in hushed tones, the millionaire doctor who lived alone in a vast empty mansion. His polished shoes struck the pavement with steady, purposeful steps as he entered the yard. His sharp gaze swept across the scene, the sobbing child drenched in water, the aunt holding the hose, the uncle sneering behind her. The air seemed to tighten around him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, but thunderous enough to pierce every ear. "Is this how you treat your own family? Richard has barely been laid to rest, and you disgrace his memory like this." At the sound of her father's name, Emily lifted her tear-streaked face. For the first time that day, a flicker of astonishment lit her wide eyes. Karen's lips twitched, but she quickly forced a brittle smile. Dr. Harris, you misunderstand. We were only trying to teach the girl a lesson. She's stubborn. If we're not strict, she'll grow up impossible to handle. Dr. Harris's gaze did not soften. His eyes lingered on the hose still clutched in Karen's hand. Teaching, he said each word deliberate heavy. This is not discipline. This is cruelty. David stepped forward, trying to sound bold, though his voice cracked. She's our niece. We can raise her however we want. You have no right to interfere. In an instant, Dr. Harris closed the distance. His movement was swift, decisive. With a sharp flick of his arm, he knocked David's hand away as the man reached for Emily. David stumbled back, stunned. Without another word, Dr. Harris bent down and lifted Emily into his arms. She was trembling, dripping wet, clutching her teddy bear with what little strength she had left. For the first time since the fire, Emily felt arms around her that did not push her away. Arms that held her instead of hurting her. And yet, as she buried her face against his shoulder, one desperate thought pierced her small, frightened heart. Would this man abandon her too? Just like everyone else. The drive to Dr. Michael Harris's estate was silent except for the hum of the car's engine. Emily sat stiffly in the leather seat, her teddy bear pressed tight against her chest. Water still dripped from her hair, leaving dark stains on the seat, but she didn't dare move. She kept her eyes on the window, watching the trees and houses slide by, each one more unfamiliar than the last. When the car slowed and finally stopped, Emily blinked. Before her rose a sprawling mansion of gleaming glass and stone, its long veranda stretching like open arms. Warm lights shone behind tall windows, but the air felt colder than the autumn wind outside. She hesitated at the gates, clutching her teddy bear as though it were the only anchor left in her world. Dr. Harris stepped out first. His movements composed, his face unreadable. He opened the door for her and waited, not rushing her. His tall frame loomed against the glow of the porch lights. To the townsfolk, he was a millionaire doctor, a man whose name appeared in magazines and medical journals. Yet to Emily, he was simply a stranger who had lifted her from the wet concrete of her aunt's yard. "Come inside," he said quietly. Emily's feet felt glued to the ground. At last, she followed him into the foyer. The mansion's polished wooden floors gleamed, and chandeliers hung like frozen rain from the high ceilings. To a child who had lived in an ordinary family home, the sight was overwhelming. The house seemed too big, too spotless, more like a museum than a place where people lived. A woman in a neat white uniform appeared from the hallway. She was in her 40s, her dark hair pulled back in a bun. "Dr. Harris, you're back early," she said briskly, then her eyes softened as they fell on Emily. "And who's this little sweetheart?" "This is Emily Parker," Harris replied. "She'll be staying here for now." The woman crouched to Emily's level, her smile gentle. "I'm Linda Johnson, the nurse. If you need anything, you just call me. All right?" Emily nodded faintly, but said nothing, her arms tightening around the teddy bear. Linda glanced at Harris, her expression concerned. "She's soaked through. I'll prepare some dry clothes and warm milk." She hurried off toward the kitchen. Left alone in the cavernous living room, Emily sat on the edge of a sofa, her small frame swallowed by the cushions. She stared down at the floorboards, unable to look around. Every corner seemed too wide, too strange. The silence pressed in, broken only when Harris sat opposite her. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Are you hungry?" he asked after a pause. Emily's lips parted, but only a whisper escaped. I just want my mum. The words hung in the air, like a stone dropped into deep water. Harris's throat tightened. He had heard desperate pleas from patients in hospital corridors, but none had pierced him like this. For a moment he said nothing. His eyes lowered, his fingers curling against his knees. Linda returned with a tray, a cup of warm milk, a plate of cookies, and a folded set of pajamas. She set them on the table, her voice soothing. "Eat a little, dear. It will help you sleep." Emily only shook her head, her teddy bear clutched so tightly it seemed strained. Linda sighed, but didn't press further. She simply pushed the tray closer and left quietly. Night fell over Maplewood. Exhausted, Emily curled up on the sofa, her eyelids heavy. At last sleep claimed her, though her small shoulders twitched with every dream. Harris hadn't moved. He stood near the window watching the child with arms crossed, his face shadowed by memories he could never escape. He remembered his younger sister, the fragile girl who had once clutched a ragged doll, waiting for him to come home. The accident that took her life had left him scarred. He had built his career, his wealth, his reputation, but no fortune could mend the guilt of that night. Now, watching Emily clutch a soaked teddy bear, he felt the old wound rip open. Sometime past midnight, a piercing cry shattered the stillness. "Daddy, Mummy, don't leave me." Emily bolted upright, drenched in sweat, her small body trembling. The teddy bear slipped from her arms, rolling across the floor. She sobbed, reaching blindly into the darkness. Harris rushed to her side. His hand gripped the doorknob for a moment, frozen by the sight, her tiny frame twisting in terror, her forehead burning with fever. The image of his sister flashed before him again, calling his name just before she was taken from him forever. His breath faltered, but then he forced the memory aside. He strode in and knelt beside the sofa. Gently he pressed his hand to Emily's forehead. The heat jolted him. He turned to Linda, who had hurried in with a basin of water and cloths. "Her fever's spiking," Linda said quickly. "We need to keep her cool. If it rises any higher, we'll have to take her to the hospital." Harris sat down, his composure cracking for the first time. He took Emily's trembling hand in both of his. Her small fingers clutched his weakly, as though she were grasping at life itself. "I won't leave you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Do you hear me, Emily? I won't leave you." Her breathing slowed slightly, the frantic sobs fading to whimpers. Though her eyes never opened, her grip eased as if her spirit believed him. All night, Harris remained by her side. The mansion, with all its grandeur and wealth, felt less like a palace and more like a fragile refuge. In that long night of fever and memory, two wounded hearts, one old one, unbearably young, found themselves bound together by pain, by silence, and by a fragile promise. Yet beyond the mansion walls, another scene unfolded. In the Miller household, Karen slammed a glass onto the table, her eyes blazing. Debt papers lay scattered before her. "Everything will slip away if we don't act quickly," she hissed. David rubbed his temples, weary. "She's still our niece. Isn't this too cruel?" "Cruel," Karen snapped, leaning forward. "She's an obstacle. With her gone, the estate will be ours. I already have the drafts of the will. All we need is to make it look official." David fell silent, his face pale under the lamp's glow. The storm was gathering. The chill of early autumn lingered in the air as Emily clutched her teddy bear and followed Linda to the gates of Maplewood Elementary School. It was her first day back since the fire and the fever. Linda bent down to adjust the scarf around her neck. You'll be fine, sweetheart. If anything feels too hard, tell your teacher. Don't keep it inside. Emily nodded faintly, but said nothing. The schoolyard felt like another world. Children ran laughing and shouting, their shoes clattering against the pavement. Emily shrank into herself, hugging the teddy bear closer. When she entered the classroom, whispers rippled like a draft. Look, it's the orphan girl, one boy muttered loudly enough for all to hear. Another snatched the teddy bear from her arms, holding it high above her reach. Check this out, the orphan's ragged toy. Does she think hugging this will bring her parents back? The children burst into laughter. Emily lunged forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. Give it back. It was my mum's gift. Her voice shook, drowned by mocking giggles. A sharp voice cut through the noise. Who gave you permission to do that? The room froze. Mrs. Susan Carter, their tall, stern homeroom teacher, had entered. Her brown hair was tied neatly back, her gaze fierce. She swept the class with her eyes before settling on the boy holding the bear. Do you understand what it means to lose your parents? Do you know the weight of clinging to the only thing you have left? Shame flushed the boy's cheeks. He lowered the toy into Emily's trembling hands. Silence replaced laughter. Mrs. Carter softened her tone, resting a hand on Emily's shoulder. You have nothing to be ashamed of. That teddy bear is love your mother left behind. Keep it close. For the first time since the fire, Emily felt a fragile spark of safety. During recess, Mrs. Carter sat with her under the old oak tree. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and placed it in Emily's hands. Sometimes the hardest things can't be said aloud, but you can write them. Let the pages speak for you. Emily opened the first page, her hand trembling. Slowly she wrote, Today someone protected me. I feel a little safer. Mrs. Carter smiled warmly, not reading further, only nodding in quiet approval. But safety was fleeting. As the days passed, whispers spread beyond the schoolyard. At the marketplace, in church pews, in Maplewood's quiet streets, people murmured, They say the girl brings misfortune. First her parents, now dragging others down. Why would Dr. Harris, a wealthy man, take her in? Must be for the inheritance. The rumours grew like weeds, choking what little peace Emily had found. Each time she heard them, her steps quickened, her head lowered. She hugged her teddy bear tighter, trying to shut out the voices that echoed her aunt's cruel words. One morning at school she froze when a woman's shrill voice rang near the gate. Watch out if that child goes near your kids. Misfortune follows her. The words carried on purpose, loud for everyone to hear. Parents turned, children stared. Before Emily could retreat, Mrs. Carter appeared, her voice ringing like a bell. The misfortune here is not the child, it is the cruelty of grown-ups who wound with words. The courtyard fell silent. The woman flushed and hurried away. Emily's heart pounded. Never before had anyone defended her so fiercely. For a moment, warmth flickered through the fear. That evening, as Harris drove her home, Emily sat quietly by the window. At last she whispered so faintly he almost didn't hear Uncle Michael. Do you also think I bring bad luck? The question struck him like a blade. He pulled the car to the side, turned to her fully. His hand rested gently on her trembling shoulders. His voice was low but resolute. No, Emily. You are not bad luck. You are the greatest blessing to come into my life. Her wide eyes searched his face. When she saw the truth shining in his gaze, tears slipped free. She clung to him, whispering through sobs. So, I'm really not unlucky. Never, he murmured. I promise. That night, as dinner was being served, Linda brought in a plain brown envelope. Emily watched curiously as Harris opened it. Inside were several photocopied papers and a short, hastily scrawled note. The papers were a forged will Richard Parker's signature clumsily imitated. The note read only, "Be careful. Someone plans to take everything. This is part of the evidence. Don't let them find out." The air in the room grew heavy. Harris's jaw clenched as he gripped the papers. Linda gasped softly. Emily's small hand reached out, her voice breaking with both fear and hope. Who? Who sent this? Who's standing on our side? Harris placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His eyes remained shadowed with suspicion, but his voice was firm. We don't know yet, but one thing is certain: you are not alone. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows over the forged documents. The battle was no longer a whisper of rumour. It was about to begin. The brown envelope lay on Dr. Harris's desk, its edges worn from his restless hands. He had read the note a dozen times, each word etched into his thoughts. He knew only one man could help him make sense of this. Robert Anderson, his old college friend, and now one of the most respected attorneys in the county. At Robert's law office, lined with shelves of thick legal volumes, Harris laid the forged will on the desk. Robert studied the papers, his sharp eyes narrowing. This signature is clumsy. Still, without the original, it's only suspicion. We'll need irrefutable proof. Harris rubbed his forehead. I've spent my life making split-second decisions in the operating room. But this feels like a maze. Every step I take, the child is at risk. Robert leaned forward, his voice steady. This isn't a maze. It's a battle. If you want to protect Emily, you must be ready for the long fight. And I'll fight with you. Outside the office, Emily sat on a bench, her teddy bear on her lap. The door was ajar, and fragments of the men's conversation drifted out. If they win, the girl will lose everything. Her chest tightened. She had always thought of Dr. Harris as unshakable. Now she realized even he could falter. For the first time, she wanted to share his burden. That evening, she opened the notebook Mrs. Carter had given her and wrote, "Even strong people can be weak. I want to help, even just a little." A few days later, the doorbell rang at Harris's mansion. Linda answered, then returned, her face pale. "Doctor, there's a woman here who says her name is Martha Collins." The name hit like a stone. Martha had been the Parker family's housekeeper for decades, then vanished after the fire. Harris hurried to the door. The woman who stepped inside was frail, her grey hair tied back neatly, her coat worn at the edges, but her eyes burned with determination. She bowed slightly. "Dr. Harris, forgive me. I've been silent too long." From her handbag, she drew a small tape recorder. When she pressed play, sharp voices filled the living room. Karen's cold tone. "We must finish this before that old doctor reacts." David's nervous reply. "But she's our niece." Karen's voice rising to a screech. "She's nothing but an obstacle. I will not let her take a single penny." Emily's eyes widened in horror. She clutched her teddy bear so tightly her knuckles turned white. Harris's fists clenched until his knuckles matched. The recording was undeniable. "Where did you get this?" Harris demanded. "I overheard them while working at their house," Martha said firmly. "I could not let the child suffer. My conscience wouldn't allow it." She hesitated, then added, "There is more. The fire. It was not entirely an accident." The room fell silent. Linda's hand froze on the chair. Emily's breath hitched. Martha's voice shook, but she pressed on. "That night before the fire, I heard someone near the garage. The door was forced. There was the faint smell of gasoline. I was too frightened to go outside. Then the flames erupted. I kept silent, uncertain. But now I believe it was deliberate." Emily burst into tears, clutching Harris's hand. "If it wasn't an accident, then who made it happen?" Harris pulled her close, his jaw tight. "Whoever it was, we will find the truth." His voice was low, but his eyes burned with fury. The day of the trial arrived. The Maplewood County Courthouse was packed townspeople filling the benches. Whispers swirled in the air about the millionaire doctor, the orphaned child, the glamorous aunt. Harris sat at the plaintiff's bench, Emily at his side clutching her teddy bear. Across the room Karen entered in a dark blue dress, her smile polished to perfection. David followed, pale and sweating, his hands twisting together. The gavel struck 3 times, silencing the room. "This court is now in session," the judge declared. The storm had begun. The courtroom was silent except for the rustle of papers. On one side sat Dr. Michael Harris, his dark suit neat, his expression calm but grave. Beside him, Emily Parker curled into her seat, clutching her teddy bear like a lifeline. Across the aisle, Karen Miller glowed in a dark blue dress, her hair styled, her lips painted red. She smiled at the judge as though she were a victim herself. David Miller sat slumped beside her, pale, his hands twisting nervously. Karen's lawyer rose first, voice booming with confidence. "Your Honor, my client only wishes to care for her niece, but Dr. Harris has taken the child away for his own gain. Here is the will proof that Richard Parker's estate rightfully belongs to his sister, Mrs. Miller." He held up the stack of papers triumphantly. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Emily lowered her head. Her heart ached. Could people truly believe such lies? Then Robert Anderson stood. Calm, steady, he placed the supposed will under a projector. "Your Honor, I must point out several irregularities. Richard Parker's signature always ended with a short underline. In this document the line is longer, unnaturally so. A small detail, but impossible to ignore." Gasps spread through the room. Robert continued, his voice rising with quiet authority. "We also have new evidence." He gestured towards the aisle. Martha Collins stepped forward, frail but resolute. She held up the tape recorder. When she pressed play, Karen's shrill voice filled the courtroom. "She's nothing but an obstacle. I won't let her take a single penny." The gallery erupted. People turned, eyes narrowing at Karen. Her face drained of colour, though she forced a brittle smile. "It's nothing but editing. Anyone can fake a recording." Robert arched a brow. Would a loyal housekeeper fabricate such slander, knowing she risks her own safety? Martha lifted her chin, her voice clear. "I could not stay silent while a child was destroyed." The judge nodded gravely. "The court will examine the tape," Continue. Just then the doors burst open. A middle-aged man in a worker's uniform strode inside. He bowed quickly. "Your Honor, I am the engineer who repaired Richard Parker's fire alarm system. On the night of the fire, the sensors were deliberately disabled. Someone removed the wires. It was no accident. Chaos swept the room. Gasps, whispers, angry mutters." Emily froze, her small body trembling. She turned wide eyes toward Harris, who squeezed her hand firmly. Karen shot to her feet, her voice shrieking. "Lies, all of it. That child is cursed. She brought the fire. She brings misfortune." Her finger stabbed toward Emily. If not for her, none of this would have happened. Silence fell like a stone. Every eye turned to the trembling girl at the witness stand. Emily's lips quivered. For a moment she felt herself sinking into the darkness of her aunt's words. But then she looked at Harris. His eyes were steady, filled, not with doubt, but with unshakable faith. Her small voice rose, trembling but clear. "I am not a curse. I have someone. I have Dr. Harris. I only have him." The gallery stilled. Some wiped their eyes. Others nodded, moved by the child's simple truth. Harris lowered his head, covering his face for a moment, overcome with emotion. The judge struck the gavel 3 times. His stern voice rang through the chamber. "Order." Based on the forged signature, the audio recording the testimony of the engineer and the child's own words. This court finds Karen Miller guilty of forgery, fraud, and child abuse. She is sentenced to 7 years in prison. David Miller, for aiding and concealing these acts, is stripped of inheritance rights and fined heavily, though granted leniency for partial cooperation. A collective sigh swept through the room. Justice at last. Karen screamed as officers took her by the arms. "You traitors!" That child cursed us all, but no one listened. Faces turned away in disgust. David sank into his seat, weeping, whispering Harris's name, begging for mercy. Harris looked at him coldly. "You turned your back on her when she needed you. Now this is the price you pay." Emily clung to Harris's hand as they left the courthouse, her tears falling not from fear, but from a strange, fragile relief. For the first time she felt the world might hold a place for her. The mansion that once felt cold now brimmed with light. Sunlight poured through wide windows, carrying warmth into every corner. On the long dining table, white roses mixed with bright sunflowers, carefully arranged by Martha Collins. Robert Anderson arrived with a bottle of wine, and Mrs. Susan Carter brought a small wrapped gift. Upstairs, Emily Parker stood before a mirror. She wore a simple white dress, her hair braided neatly with a pale blue ribbon. Her fingers trembled as she touched the hem. "Today is my birthday," she whispered. Her 8th, her first without her parents, but also her first in a home where she was not alone. Downstairs, Dr. Michael Harris waited quietly by the doorway. When he saw her descending the stairs, a lump rose in his throat. He remembered the shivering child, drenched and abandoned on a wet driveway. Now she stood tall, her eyes shy, yet carrying a spark of hope. The birthday cake was placed at the center of the table. 7 small candles flickered, their flames gentle. Emily froze, her breath catching. The sight of fire pulled her back to that dreadful night. Smoke screams her father's arms pushing her into safety before he disappeared forever. Her knees weakened. Harris stepped forward, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was calm, patient. "Emily, this flame is not the same. It doesn't destroy. It lights the way for wishes." Tears welled in her eyes. She shut them tightly, inhaled, and blew. The flames vanished, replaced by applause and cheers. Harris bent low, his voice breaking. "I'm proud of you." Emily turned, tears streaming her lips, trembling. Then with all the courage she could gather, she whispered the word that had been locked in her heart, "Dad." The room fell silent. Susan pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling. Martha's shoulders shook with quiet sobs. Robert lowered his gaze, a faint smile breaking through his stern face. Harris froze. His breath caught. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her close, his tears mingling with hers. "Yes, Emily, I'm your dad." Later, as laughter and cake filled the room, Emily carefully cut slices for everyone. "Aunt Susan, this piece is for you. Grandma Martha, this one for you. Uncle Robert, thank you." Each word tied her to a family that had once seemed impossible. That night, when the guests had gone, the house grew quiet again. Emily sat curled in Harris's lap, her diary open on the table. In shaky letters she wrote, "I am not afraid anymore. I have found happiness. I have a dad." Outside, the moon cast silver light across the garden. Harris stroked her hair, whispering a vow as he gazed at the night sky. "Every ending is only the beginning of another journey. I will protect this child with everything I have left." And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10 and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.